78% chance of developing the stomach cancer, and females have, I think they've lowered it now. I think it's more like 54% chance of getting the stomach cancer. At the time that I found out that I had the gene mutation, it was more, their statistics were more like 73% chance as well of getting stomach cancer. So I think men's chances are a little bit higher than the females. But it's a very tricky gene because the type of cancer that it causes is called a cellular diffuse cancer. So it spreads on a cellular level instead of, most cancers form like a tumor and then they're easier to find and detect. This type of cancer, it is just a cellular level of cancer. So it's basically like if they were to just do endoscopies, which is where they put a tube down your throat and take pictures of your stomach inside, and they take biopsies, which is what they do right now. But it's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack if you are able to find the cancer or not, because you could have cancer throughout your whole stomach, but they might only take biopsies in places where there's no cells that have reached that spot yet. So it's very, very tricky. It's hard to detect. And so by the time that they're able to find it, it's normally too far gone to be able to help anybody. So because they have no real like sure ways of diagnosing it, like to just monitor you for the cancer, the doctors recommend removing your entire stomach prophylactically, which means you just remove it before the cancer even has a chance to start. And a lot of people who get the surgery done actually have cancer started, even though they had no symptoms, they had no signs of it, they've had the endoscopies regularly, and they've had negative tests from their endoscopies even, but the cancer has started there, which is the situation that my sister had. So back to how our family found out that we carry this gene. My aunt was only 28 or 29 years old, and she passed away from cancer. She had 2 young kids, and they thought it was pretty weird that such a young person would get stomach cancer because it's typically something that affects older people. But at that time, they didn't know anything about the gene or anything like that. They just thought it was just a weird, crappy life situation, right? So then fast forward like 15 years later, her daughter was only 20 years old and she was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And luckily, her surgeon that she had recognized and had heard about this gene before, and he kind of figured that this is way too weird that this girl's mom died 15 years ago from stomach cancer as well. And the fact that she was only 20 years old and she was like, it was stage 4 already, she was not going to beat the cancer. He knew that we needed to do the genetic testing. So in order to be tested for the gene, it's best to have somebody who has been already affected by the cancer. So that means that they've already been diagnosed with the cancer. They know they have it. And then they test their blood and they locate where the gene mutation is on their DNA strand. So then the rest of the family, they can pinpoint exactly on our DNA where that genetic mutation is located. So if you don't know where that location is, if you're somebody who does have stomach cancer, it might be harder to find on your, or if you don't have stomach cancer, sorry, then it might be harder to discover that you have it just because DNA is so complicated, obviously. But then for us to get tested, my dad had to get tested. They knew that it was from his family because of his sister that had passed away. And he actually did not want to do the genetic testing. He didn't want to know if he was a carrier or not, but he knew that myself and my 2 siblings would not be able to get the testing if he didn't get it and know what his results were. So he went for our sake. And unfortunately, he found out that he was a carrier, which meant that each of us had a 50% chance of carrying the mutation. So myself and my sister are both carriers. My brother is not a carrier, and he carries a lot of guilt that he doesn't have it and we do. So that's kind of a unique situation that a lot of people don't really think about with genetic mutations like this. Is, of course, that's a relief not to have it, but there is a little bit of survivor's guilt as well, because he feels pretty bad that we've had to go through our gastrectomies. My sister went for her total gastrectomy a year before I did, actually 364 days before I did. And I had a 4-month-old baby at that time and another 3-year-old, I think she was at the time. And I had known that I had the gene. I was 18, I believe, when I found out that I was the carrier, and I knew that I wanted to have my stomach removed. But the doctors told me that I may not be able to have kids after I have my stomach removed just because it's so hard on the body. They couldn't promise me anything. There wasn't a lot of scientific data at that time. And so I waited because I wanted to have kids, and I put it off for about 10 years. And after having kids, it was just a big worry for me, worrying about my kids, what might happen to them if I passed away. I carried a lot of anxiety. Every Christmas, every birthday party that they had, I wanted to make it like perfect for them. I wanted to take a ton of pictures just because it was only 7 months before my cousin passed away, from the time she was diagnosed until she passed away. And it like tore me up to just imagine that, every Christmas could be our last Christmas together. It was a lot of anxiety to carry. And then when my sister went for hers, she was healthy beforehand. She had a little bit of extra weight, but other than that, she was healthy. She had been taking her endoscopies regularly, as I was, every 6 months, and had no trouble. And they found cancer in her stomach when they removed it. And so I just decided that it was too much worry. I was scared that nobody else would ever love my kids the way that I do, and I didn't want them to grow up without a mom. So I decided that it was time for me to do it. My daughter was still too young at that time, so I just put it off a little bit longer, and I went for my surgery a year after my sister's surgery. And then there was a little bit of, um, I don't want to say regret, but my sister had the diagnosis of cancer when they removed her stomach. So she knew that she made the right choice. She knew that if she didn't get her stomach removed, she probably would have been dead within that year. And when they removed mine, my stomach was clear. I had no cancer cells started in my stomach. So then it was like, I felt like I was dying because it was such a hard recovery to make, but I didn't know if I actually needed to do that. So then I was living in this like kind of state of regret. Like, did I need to do this or not? But they don't have any way of knowing if that means that it never would have developed or if it just means that it hadn't started yet. So it was kind of a hard little bit of news to swallow, just because maybe I didn't need to have the stomach removed, and it is such a hard recovery and way to live now. But I know that ultimately it was the right choice, just because there's no guarantees that they'll detect it in time or anything like that. And then dealing with chemo and stuff like that, it was definitely the right choice. It just took a little time to recognize that.
What was the recovery like? What did that entail?
The recovery was very hard. My sister's recovery. So something that's a little bit unique about having your stomach removed is everybody kind of heals differently. So my sister and I had a cousin that had his stomach removed as well. Um, they both have done very well. They can eat pretty much whatever they want. They can eat a lot more than I can. My recovery was quite a bit more challenging. Um, I suffered a lot more mentally than they did as well. I think because it was so hard on my body, it was just a longer process. And so I went through a really deep depression and major health anxiety. I felt like I was dying all the time. And I just was like scared to be alone because I thought I was just going to keel over at any time and just like die. Um, I have quite a few food intolerances now, whereas my sister, the only thing she can't really tolerate is dairy products. Like lactose is the only thing that bothers her. Otherwise, she can eat whatever she wants. I am a lot more sensitive. I kind of stick to my same safe foods, I call them. I just mostly eat like meat, plain, like processed pasta, like refined pasta is best, like whole wheat. Lots of fiber isn't very good for me. So actually the way that I eat is quite unhealthy probably, but it's the only thing that doesn't make me sick. And if I do have stuff that makes me sick, it causes so much pain that it's like can be similar to what it feels like to have child labor pains. Like it's quite painful, the reaction that my body has to some foods. So for me, I had kind of like the farther end of recoveries compared to most people. Most people do fairly well. And I do feel like now it's been almost 6 years. So now I know what my trigger foods are that I just avoid and I don't get sick as much anymore. But that first year when my body was relearning how to digest food again, it had no idea how to digest food anymore. So it was I would eat and then I would just like my body would try to expel it. I would just dry heave. It would try to come back up, but because it's down so low from when they remove the stomach, they just kind of attach your esophagus to your small intestine. So then your food's down so low that it's very rare to actually be able to bring anything up. So I spent a lot of time just dry heaving that first year. It wasn't very much fun.
Yeah, I've got a question at the back.
Sure.
How do you digest foods now that you don't have a stomach?
I had a little trouble hearing it. Was it how do I digest food now?
Yeah.
So now I have to chew my food totally and completely. So for eating for you guys, you might chew it a couple of times just to get it down your throat and it's good. But for me, I have to, your stomach actually breaks down your food so that it's like just completely soft and a paste for it to go into your small intestine. And now I have to do the work with my mouth for my stomach not being there. So I have to chew everything entirely. So it takes me a very long time to eat just the small little amount of food that I do eat. And I can't eat and drink at the same time because if I drink, it's going to try to push down the food too quickly and then it causes me pain.
Yeah, we got a question here. Bowen.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, does it affect when you drink like alcohol or harder things like that? Can you still? I'm just wondering, like.
Yes. So I don't drink hardly at all because even if I have like 3 sips of a beer, I will get drunk from it because it's immediately absorbed into my body. So as soon as I have even just a tiny little bit, my body's can't handle it. It's the same actually with sugar. If I eat too much sugar, your stomach holds the food or your drinks and it slowly releases stuff into your intestine where things are absorbed. And so because it goes straight into my intestine, everything that I put down there is immediately absorbed. So I get tipsy really quickly, but it passes really quickly too.
Yeah, so like part like that with liquor, what is it like to do drink other things like caffeine or like soda or anything like that? Like, is that also hard for you to drink?
Yeah. I don't drink coffee. I drink coffee, but I drink decaf coffee just because the caffeine is too stimulating to my intestine. So I avoid caffeinated stuff. Pop also, I can't drink regular pop. It's too much sugar for me. I get really sick from it. So I will drink diet on occasion, but I prefer to like make it a little bit flat because the bubbles are hard to have in I call it my tube. My tube doesn't handle the carbonation very well. So I don't really drink too much pop at all.
Any other questions?
I was curious about the when your aunt passed away that they didn't know about the hereditary genes and was having when your cousin had her tests done or all of that, did that help with that process or particularly with this gene?
Yeah, so it was when my cousin got sick that they connected that it actually was the genetic mutation because at the time that my aunt passed away, it was like 25 years ago now, probably. So at that time, they really had no idea about too many genetic things yet. This gene mutation was discovered in like the 1960s sometime, but it was very not well known yet at that point. And so they just didn't recognize then, and we didn't know about any more family history. We now looking back in our family tree, we do think that it came from my dad's mom's dad is the farthest that they can trace it back. They think that he would have been my great, so third great grandpa, they think probably passed away from stomach cancer. But I mean, at those times, they didn't even know that he had cancer. He just got skinny and died. But it was when my cousin got sick that they recognized that there was this probably genetic component to it, and to start testing our family to look out for us. It wasn't for her, it was for the rest of our family.
Yeah, same.
You said that it was hard, if not possible, to puke things up since you don't have a stomach. So wouldn't that make it a little dangerous to eat meat because it might be infected or something? And if it was, how would that work, seeing that you can't puke it up if something was old or infected?
Like your immune response, like if you're something like your natural response, if there's something in your body that's not supposed to be there, you want to get it out, right?
Yeah,
Like,
if we can't get out, what would happen?
like if you have the flu or something.
I've actually not gotten the flu since I've had my stomach removed, so I don't know. I've heard, like, I'm in some groups on Facebook where people have said that they have been able to bring stuff up. It's very hard to bring stuff up, but that they have been able to, and that they have had the stomach flu. But I think that for me, it's probably more effective to it just runs through me rather than comes back up. Probably is more so what happens with when I'm affected by something like that. But that being said, I am more careful because I know that I don't have the stomach acid there to protect me from stuff like that. So I am very careful about what I eat and cooking foods properly and not eating stuff that's too old and stuff like that, just because I do recognize that I probably would be more at risk for stuff like that, for sure.
How about other things that stomach acid would normally help our bodies dissolve or deal with that you can't, I guess, maybe not do anymore? Are there supplements or things that you have to take to kind of balance that out?
But like nutrients that maybe you're not able to get.
Yeah, I know for me, I have really bad heartburn, and so I take a pill that's a proton pump inhibitor that slows my ability to make stomach acid. And so because of that, there's certain nutrients, or I think that I just can't absorb anymore.
Yeah. So I do have to take a lot of nutrients. I probably get the majority of my nutrients from what I take every day. So I take like a handful of vitamins every day. Some people do have to take creon, which is a digestive enzyme. So far, I don't have to. My body's adapted enough that I don't need to do that. Once I get older, I might have to look at that. It seems to be a pretty common thing. But for myself right now, your stomach is what absorbs B12 as well as iron. So I got pregnant after I had my surgery and had a baby. And even in a normal pregnancy, iron is a problem. So I had to start getting iron infusions while I was pregnant, just because I couldn't even tolerate the iron supplements. But then I also have to take like multivitamins, vitamin D, vitamin C, and then B12. I did have to do injections in the beginning for B12 as well, but I've managed to be able to keep up with it with an oral tablet now. So, but because I stick to my safe foods, and too much fiber for me I can't digest it well. It's something that sets me off with my pains. So I know that I get most of my nutrition from my vitamins that I take.
You mentioned you talked about like you read from another group and someone was talking about their experiences. And what has that been like as far as finding a support network? So you'd have your sister that I guess and your family that you would have for support, but what was it like? Kind of like was it like a Facebook group or something?
Yeah, so I actually help run a couple of support groups on Facebook. In the beginning, I knew that it was going to be a really hard recovery, so I never actually looked into what life might actually be like aside from what I knew from my sister and my cousin. I didn't want to read on Google or anything like that what life would be like. And I kind of felt like after my surgery, I traveled out of province to a surgeon who was more experienced with the surgery, but I still felt like I was kind of thrown into the wolves. I wasn't really given much guidance about what I should be eating or what supplement. I mean, they kind of told me, but it was not adequate, I felt like. And so I felt like it was such a lonely thing. And I felt like even my family who was here helping me with how hard my recovery was and everything, like they didn't know how to make me feel better or like that this was normal. So I looked to Facebook to find groups that were support for people who have had total gastrectomies, or I found a couple that were like weight loss surgery minded at first, but they were not what I needed at that time. So then by finding that community, it was huge. It helped me so much to just know that there was other people who understood how I was feeling, and I knew that it was normal what I was feeling. I wasn't actually dying. My body was just needing time to heal, that kind of stuff. So for me and my mental state, those communities on Facebook were tremendous for me, for sure.
Good. I guess another question I would have would be like, so since you found out about this, like, what has the testing, how has the advancements in testing? Like I imagine there's been all kinds of, you've probably seen all kinds of different advancements or different kind of breakthroughs just in your time. Like, I just wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, unfortunately, there hasn't, that I know of, hasn't been too many tremendous
So,
ones. Stomach cancer is fairly rare in the cancer world. Like there isn't a lot of money put into stomach cancers, but because this cellular diffuse cancer is even more rare than, like, I think it's like 1 to 3% of stomach cancer cases are this diffuse type of gastric cancer. So there's very little research being done on it. There's a team in BC actually that does some work on it. And then there's a team, I forget the name of it. There's one in the US that I know of, and then New Zealand where it was discovered. There's also that, but there's not a lot of money to be put into such a rare form of cancer. So there hasn't actually been as much as you might think might have come from the last 10 years since I've found out about it, which is unfortunate. But I hope my thought process in having kids, knowing that I have a 50% chance of passing it on to them, would be that that's a long time for medical advancements to happen. But now I have a daughter who's 10, actually she's 11 now. And she's in the window of most genetic screening they won't do until somebody's 18 because they have to make the choice themselves as an adult or whatever. But because our family seems to be affected by this gene mutation earlier than it typically does, most people see the cancer develop in their like late 30s, early 40s. Our family, it seems to hit in the 20s, which is kind of abnormal of the genetic mutation in itself. So our team has told us that our kids should probably be tested 10 years before the first affected case, which my daughter is now in that window. So now my thought process of there being many medical advancements by the time it was of concern for us, we're already at that point and haven't really seen that many. So now it's a little bit more stressful again because now I'm worried about my kids, right? So they have a 50% chance of getting it from me too.
Oh, yeah.
What would be one of the most out of the ordinary side effects you've noticed since getting the surgery?
Well, aside from like the extreme amount of pain that I can get into from bowel spasming or like intestine spasms, I think it's probably actually my, I don't want to say I've developed ADHD since I had the surgery, but I definitely feel like I have a lot of the symptoms of ADHD since I had the surgery. I feel like, I don't know if it's because of my poor nutrition, but I feel like I'm not as sharp as I used to be. And I feel like things kind of just frazzle me more. My memory's not as good. I feel like I'm just kind of a little bit different in that way. I used to be super, super organized and not forget anything. And now I have trouble remembering things.
You mentioned a team that you have, like, is that a team of doctors or is that a team of people that are kind of, now that this is known, is like the people that are kind of helping guide you guys?
Yeah, so we have like our family doctor, my sister and I and my dad, we all see the same family doctor. So he really knows our history very well. We also live in a small town, so my auntie is like his receptionist, and so that's nice that we have such good care because we never have to explain ourselves. which is really good because I've gone to like emergency room that first year. I spent a lot of time at the hospital just needing hydration and stuff like that. And even doctors that are just working in the ER room are like, what? You can live without your stomach? Like, how is that possible? And it's like, how are you my doctor right now? And how do I trust you? Because they don't know what to do with you. So we have our family doctor who, once he learned about our situation, he really poured himself into learning more about it and researching it on his level of education. And then we also have a genetic counselor that our family went to. And then my cousin Erin, when she was sick and passing away, her doctor, her oncologist, surgeon actually had to step away from our family because he felt he was too closely involved, just because his patient Aaron was so young. He had a daughter the same age, and he just felt like he was too emotionally attached with our family. So he was the one that referred us to Calgary to get the surgeries done there, just because he knew that Dr. Bathe is his name. He specializes in GI cancers, and he knew that he would be like the most experienced surgeon that we could go to. So he sent us that way. And it was actually a Zoom conference that I had with him the first time that I spoke with him. And he just told me that he was prioritizing our family for his care because he doesn't get to save most of his patients. So it's pretty unique to know that you're at such a high risk for such a dangerous cancer and be able to take proactive steps and prevent it from happening. So he's been really, really amazing. Like, even since my surgery, if I'm having any issues, I can still email his receptionist and he still lets me ask him questions and stuff like that, which is pretty rare for a specialized surgeon of that caliber, especially.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how has your like day-to-day life been affected by this? Like, aside from eating and drinking, like how has just your work life been affected and your social life? Like, how has that changed?
It's actually changed quite a bit. So because I have to eat so often, I have to eat it depends what I eat and how much I eat, but I have to eat a lot of protein, and I have to eat at least every couple of hours. So if I don't eat every 2 hours, I don't feel hungry. I feel like I'm going to faint. Like, I have no stores for my body to back up onto. And so anytime I leave my house, I always have a cooler bag full of food that, like, typically I'll take like a thing of cottage cheese and eat that, just because it's such a quick and easy protein. I don't, for some reason, despite not being able to really do lactose, I can eat cottage cheese. But so because I have so many food intolerances, it is hard for me. Like, traveling kind of gives me a lot of anxiety, just because I don't really, especially to go out of country, I don't know, I'm not familiar with what restaurants might have some foods that I can actually tolerate, stuff like that. But I mean, aside from me being really skinny, most people would not know that I live without my stomach. Like, I still am kind of back to my normal, like, I organize hockey tournaments for my kids all the time, and I'm very active in my community that way. So just as long as I take care of my food needs and I make sure that I'm not scared. The hardest part is that I feel weird to eat in front of people. So as long as I'm comfortable to like keep a snack in my bag, or even where I can just discreetly put a candy in my mouth, even just to keep me floating till I can get to my truck to actually eat some food, then I'm pretty normal, and most people wouldn't even recognize that there's anything different about me.
Thinking, like, going back a little bit to you're talking about, not being many advancements in understanding this particular type of cancer. And I was wondering, like, if you had any insight as to like what needs to be found out.
My hope is that they can find out what causes. So I have like two CDH1 genes, right? One from my mom and one from my dad. And for whatever reason, the one from my dad is faulty, but the one from my mom can carry me without the cancer starting. So I hope that someday they can figure out what causes that one from my dad to switch so that the cancer starts, and what, is there foods that we're eating that can cause it to happen, or is it stress, or is there a medication or whatever. Like, it would be so amazing if they could figure out what causes it to switch on,
Right.
or at least a better testing option. Like I said, right now you can do all these, you could go every month and get an endoscopy done and they could still miss it. So for sure, something that's a little bit more reliable to just stay in surveillance mode for it.
And the endoscopy, for those that don't know, could you just explain that a little bit to us?
Yeah, so it's just a camera that they put on a tube and they go through your mouth and down into your stomach. They take pictures and they take biopsies. But because the cancer doesn't form any sort of tumor, it might not even look weird where the cancer is actually growing because it's at a cellular level. They don't know where to take the biopsies. So some people might have a little bit of, they call it erosion, it might look like, but it's like microscopic. So it's super, super easy to miss. They give you some sedation, they have you swallow the tube, and then they pump your stomach full of air so that they can take pictures and look at it all. And actually the first one that I had, the doctor did so many biopsies that he nicked a vein and didn't notice and sent me home, and I just about bled to death. So even to go for my endoscopy every 6 months was super stressful for those 10 years before I finally had my surgery done.
Yikes.
Yeah. Which is super rare. So if you ever have to go for an endoscopy, don't stress about that. It's not common.
That's not. What is it? Why did you end up deciding to, I want to get this story out? Like, I want to, I guess you started the groups. Was that the driving force?
No, actually, the news crew hounded me for a year before I finally agreed to do the story. My friend is one of the news anchors at the news station, and so she told the reporter about my story and thought it would be a cool news story. And so they kind of hounded me for about a year before I finally agreed to them. But I do, the reason why I did finally give in to them was just because I think that genetic risks and discoveries are becoming more and more common. There's a lot more genes that they know of that are affecting people and causing cancer, and people are having to make the choices of, there's the breast cancer genes where people might have to get preventative mastectomies and stuff like that. And even though the stomach one is super, super rare, there's other ones that people do have to deal with. And I guess I just wanted people to know that they're not alone, and that even you can be going through something entirely different, but it's just a complicated health issue or something like that. And they just know that hopefully they have hope that things will get better. I don't know.
Yeah, so I guess just off this, kind of been thinking about this for a little bit, but because I'm type 1 diabetic, so that's my pancreas doesn't produce insulin because my blood cells, for whatever reason, decide, hey, we're going to kill the cells. And I've been wondering, because I could get a pancreas transplant, but it would only last for like a few months or maybe a year at most, kind of thing, before that happens again. And I was wondering if that would be like if you could get a stomach transplant, and if that would be a reason why you couldn't, or if there's other reasons.
I'm not 100% sure on the answer of that. I think that it could still develop, maybe. I don't know. I just know that when I had my surgery done, the surgeon told me that if the importance of going to an experienced surgeon is that if they leave even one single stomach cell in my body, that cancer still has a chance to start developing. So I don't know if it would make a difference if it's somebody else's stomach or not. I'm not entirely sure about that, actually. It is a good question, but I don't know for sure.
We're actually at the end of in 2 weeks, we're meeting with some people from BC organ donation, and we're going to be discussing organs and then transplants, and whether or not the body is able to accept or reject different parts. So we could ask that then.
That would be a good question. I'd be interested to know their answer on that.
We'll keep you posted. We'll write that one down.
Thank you.
Any other questions or anything, gang?
Sweet.
Well, thank you very much. Ethan?
I would just like to thank you on behalf of AIAO for coming in and answering all our questions. It was really nice hearing your story. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very appreciated.
Thank you. No problem. See you guys.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.